I met with the Pentagon last week, and
Come home, bro.
the so I met with some guys at the Pentagon last week. You see all these videos about these immigrants getting deported and this poor family that got caught up. I mean, that stuff's just going to happen. There's just going to be stuff that it gets messed up. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so I met with those guys at the Pentagon from the Navy, and I think there may be a funding opportunity for us there, and we're looking into some various foundations and grants and stuff like that. Mississippi's got some unique funding strategies too, and so
Do you feel like your life is more abundant now that you've gave so much?
I,
People's got to be wondering that about you. I am like, man, this guy has gave a lot more than I ever have thought to do.
well, I don't even mean to imply that I've gave a lot.
I know, man, but
I don't even mean to imply that. But
everybody in the room's thinking like, dang, bro, that's bold, man.
well, it's more
Like,
about
are you getting broker because you're doing this?
I can't say that, right? I mean, like, here's a crazy thing. Like my wife said the other day, she was like,
we got a banger in here, old Chris Donovant.
Yeah.
Originally from Virginia.
OG.
And I mean, my buddy Tyler just wouldn't let off of me about having you on the show, dude. Said you were an absolute genius. And just the last 5 minutes, bro, you are.
Well, I've just got Tyler sold really well, is what it is.
You got me sold already. I mean, you came in talking about dump trucks and then talked about the specs on this mic. And then you said phonetic literacy. Talking about your name, brother.
I like looked up 3 things before I got here.
And that was it?
What's 3 cool things I can talk about that make me sound tough and smart and everything? And those are what it came up with. So AI helped me out.
Yeah. And you see, I got AI, bro.
Look at there.
Give me 10 questions in case I drop the mic on this guy. And I'm glad I did now because you're a ball, dude. You got it going. But no, dude, you got Next Tech Academy.
Yeah.
Where you're doing God's work with that, baby.
Amen.
I mean, I see you out there, but I was unaware of it.
Well, we've kind of done that on purpose. I'm going to turn my phone off so I don't get a racket while we're doing this.
Oh, you're good, bro.
Don't want to be a boomer, But
I'm sure you're much needed.
Bo, if you just knew. And so I'm originally from Virginia, right? And
is it like everybody thinks it is? I watch a lot of videos on Virginia, but it looks like it's beautiful.
Man, I'm gonna tell you, I'll tell you my opinion on something. Okay, you just want to hear my opinion, and it's not even worth a cup of coffee, right? But when the Lord is kind of stitching up the New Testament, He's going to talk in Revelation about this city Foursquare with streets of gold and walls of jasper and all these things, and He's kind of giving us this picture of heaven. But you've got at this point 1,500 years of writings. 40 men have written this book, right? And the great majority of this message that He's written to us is about repent, because heaven is a real place, and I want you to be with me so bad that I'm going to spend all my time making sure that you get there. I mean, John chapter 5 and verse 39, that Jesus is going to say, you search the scriptures, in them you think you have eternal life. The scriptures, they testify of me. The whole of the scriptures is telling us that Jesus is coming, and the whole of this kind of stitching it up is that He's coming again, right? And so you get this kind of picture in Revelation where God is drawing this imagery, right? Where He must use something that's kind of a capture moment, right? But He doesn't spend a lot of time drawing heaven because, like, for real, I don't care about gold or silver.
Yeah, same.
You know what I mean? Like, and really, do I want a street made out of it? Who cares? You know what I mean? So what He does is He does this. As He says, you know what, man? All the stuff that trouble you, like all the things that really bother you in your life, like, I'm going to take care of all that. All your tears, I'm going to wipe that away. All your sorrow, it'll be okay. I know you're scared of the dark. Whether you want to admit it or not, you hear something in the dark. Even if you're 40 years old, you hear something and you think, what's that? Because I can't see it. He said, you won't have to worry about that either. I'll be the light. Well, the reason why, my opinion, I think He says those things is because He never wants us to compare to something on earth, because we're such 5 senses type people. See, touch,
Right.
hear, and so what that does is it makes us like, Hank Williams Jr. used to sing of heaven ain't a lot like Dixie, right? Well, where I come from, I've been doing mission work for 15 years, right? And so I've been in a lot of places, really pretty places. Well, there's nothing to me as pretty as where I come from. I mean, it really is a special place.
You live in a holler?
I lived in a holler. And I mean, like, you just got to realize that, like, my family has lived there since the 1650s.
So if I just rolled up in my truck out there in your holler, y'all alerting everybody, like, hey man, here's a
You
truck.
wouldn't make it, son. It
It's
wouldn't
one
be.
way in them, right?
Yeah, you would. There wouldn't be no alerting. They would know before you got there. They would be alerted.
Is yours paved nicely?
It is now. I mean, like, you got to figure, like, I grew up with just a rural route,
It's
and
so funny, dude. I just watched Peter Santinello. He goes to Virginia, and I rewatched that one because if I watch anything entertaining, it's about places.
yeah,
And so I rewatched one in Virginia, and they going in a holler, and he's riding with a local guy, and he was like, "Now back in the day, they had one party lines, and if
Yeah.
we would have came down this road, they're telling everybody this."
yeah. I mean, it was, so you had your ring,
Right.
right?
Do
Like
you remember that time?
yeah, like you got a bling bling, you're a bling bling
Yeah,
bling,
they
and then a
said it would
short ring.
ring 4 times or 1 time.
Yep, yep. And so you got to think, like, my mama is number 11 of 13 kids, right? And so for me, my county has only had one high school and two elementary schools for the whole county. So growing up, I mean, like, I was kin to everybody in my school, just about. And if you did something wrong, son, you better beat that story home before your mom and daddy found out about it, because it was going to grow. You was already going to get striped, but you better beat that thing home because somebody was going to narc on you because everybody knew your business, right?
Was you smart in school?
I mean, I was. I
Dude,
mean,
you're smart. I can already tell. I'm kind of nervous right now.
I
Honestly.
didn't care about. I mean, I'll just say this: I'm thankful that I got a lot of the opportunities that I had because it's helped me become the person that I am today, right? But for me, school was, and I don't know why I can tell you 24 times 9 is 216, but I can just tell you that, right? And so school to me
Did you
was,
plan to do those numbers?
well, give me another one. 15 times 7, 105. I mean, I'm just saying, like, I don't know why it is what it is,
You
but
know your higher intellectual factors, though, just
I,
not your senses.
I don't, that, see, and I don't want to put any of the focus on, like,
I know
Chris.
it ain't about you,
Yeah,
bro.
because I just
We
don't
know
care.
you're hard.
I just don't
already
care
know.
about it,
I want to
but-
go ahead and say everything he submitted on his podcast form was about the good Lord, bro. I'm gonna have to drag him to talk about what he's done on
that's what I'm
Earth.
saying. Like, it doesn't matter to me, right? And so, I went to school, and when I was in high school, when I was in, like, the 8th grade, they carried us over to the high school. And back then we still had vocational training and everything in schools. And, I had a little redheaded Irish shop teacher, right? Mr. Al Rayborn. And he had about a 1940 model South Bend lathe, the ones you used to see with the belts up in the ceiling and stuff, right? Now they had put a motor on it, so it was driven from underneath. And I remember, you grew up as a boy in the country, and you used to fixing things with a hammer and a pair of pliers, and at best a stick welder, right?
Or a screwdriver for
Yeah.
a chisel.
Yeah. And so when I saw that, I remember thinking, like, I don't know what he's doing, but I can do a lot with that, right? And so that was a capture moment. We have these kind of capture moments in our lives where this, history is made in the moment of a time, right? And so your story gets written of your life on these capture moments, this thing that caused a pivot, right? That was a pivot moment for me. I didn't realize it, but I went to high school and I took metal shop and I went to work. I went to college. During the 90s, Virginia, our economy was, a lot of it was tobacco, and the government had price control systems on tobacco back then. How old are you?
I'm 39.
So this will be a little. I'm 43. I'm born in 81, so I'll be 44 this year. So the government used to have price controls on tobacco, but like the 80s, dude, everybody smoked, right? And in the 90s, when the tide was kind of turning, the government was like, we got to get out of this. And so one of the things that they made them do to all the big tobacco companies, Philip Morris, Winston, all those guys, they said, we're getting out of the price. We're going to go to a complete free market system, and we need you guys. We'll hold that. That's why you've never seen sweeping lawsuits to the tobacco companies, because the government kind of held that stuff at bay with the kind of contingency that they're going to spread the love a little bit, right? So all the tobacco money revenue that the government was going to lose, we said, we're going to leave that in your hands. As long as you do your part, we're going to do our part. And so my school east of me in Danville, Virginia, was right between Philip Morris, where all the Marlboros are made, and Winston-Salem, North Carolina, where all the Winston and Joe Camel cigarettes are made, right? We all grew up with the Marlboro Man and Joe Camel. Well, they stuck their hands out both ways, and they literally built the best machine tool program probably in the world. And so I got recruited by a company that I went to work for. We designed and built that's what I did in my adult life, was designed and built the naval reactors.
So are you an engineer?
I was, well, they sent me back to school to get my engineering stuff.
I mean, I know you're an engineer either way, but like
I
on
didn't,
paper?
yeah, I mean, paper don't mean anything. I never left the shop.
Right.
Even after I went to school, I never left the shop because I just like to make
You're
things.
a doer.
Right? Yeah, and so we designed and built the naval reactors for, the carriers and the submarines. And I own my own construction company, hence the dump truck conversation. And I ran own my own consulting firm too. So if you're making brackets for your mics and you want to go from 50 an hour to 500, we'd come in and help you design your tooling and your fixturing and everything like that to speed up your process. But after,
And when were you doing that?
the whole time I was working in the shop. I mean, I worked 80 hours a week for 20 years. And
Dang.
so that's why I'm retired. And because you start asking yourself these questions, because like when I was in college, pivotal moment, right? Is one of these pivot moments. Somebody taught me the gospel. So I became a Christian in college. And I didn't know what I was signing up for, but if you really consider when Jesus calls Matthew there in Matthew 8 from his tax office, really, he said, just come and follow me. And what he's saying is, you're never going to make a decision again. I'm going to make the rest of them for you. And that's where I'm at, right? I mean, the Lord, I didn't know what I was signing up for, but what I realize now, looking backwards 25 years ago, is I was signing up for him to make the rest of the decisions for me. And so after being part of, some of the most prolific projects in military history and stuff I can't, there's no way I
Right.
could even breathe a word of it on here. You realize that everything that you do is just proactive. It's just moving forward, right? I can change things and I can make things better in the future, but I haven't done anything that's retroactive. Jesus is the only thing that ever did something that was retroactive, right? Any kind of social cause, I don't care what it is you come up with. It may be something that's abhorrent that we need to change, and I'm not going to get into that. But it will just change things forward. Jesus changed everything frontwards and backwards. And so my wife and I, we started praying this prayer like, Lord, help me to understand my last breath. Right? Not my next one, but my last one. The little dash between my date, on my grave. I mean, like literally, man, like I got off the bus beside my grave every day when I was growing up. My whole family was, I'm telling you, we lived there since America chapter 1, right? And when you start asking yourself that question, you have to, if you want to answer it honestly, it's going to change the way you think. And so here we are in Mississippi, hanging out with you
Right,
guys.
dude. I feel honored, man.
Well, don't
I
get
do
wrong.
something kind of weird like that. I'm not gonna say weird, but like I always try to let my dead self,
Mm-hmm.
like doing this podcast. Like our kids will see this one day.
Right.
It leaves a legacy. Just try to do things that are powerful like that can really, when I'm dead, still,
It's
spread the
eternal now,
word.
right?
Right.
Yeah, I mean, especially in a digital world, we're eternal.
Right.
Right? I mean,
And that's hard to come to, especially for guys, because I'm a trades guy too, man. I probably don't look like it. Probably look like a gay lumberjack, but you
no,
probably.
I mean, I wasn't going to hit on you.
I know, but I mean, that's what a lot of my friends say. But
Mm-mm.
dude, I love to work and love to build things, and then I just came to that pivotal moment one day, hammering on a boat in that shop. It's like, dude, you ain't serving nobody hammering on this boat, and here we are doing this, and it's. I don't even put any effort to the podcast, honestly. And
Right.
it's just seeming to flourish. And I almost feel guilty for it because it's fun. This is my going and playing golf or something like, dude, I'm going to
Yeah.
do something that makes a difference.
That's right. Well, and there's just, so you think about it, like the Lord chose communication as the way
Right.
to propagate his goodness, right? And so, you think about like Matthew 5, 13, 14, 15, 16, you're a city on a hill. No man lights a lamp and puts it under a bushel.
Right.
Therefore, let your light shine before men. They see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven. Well, you think about those things, and we've been told a lie to some degree that actions speak louder than words. And I'll amen that to some degree. But what happens is when we put words with actions, then we tell the story. because like you ride by my house and you see one of my boys picking up trash or running a tractor or something like that, you may think like, man, look at them boys. You know, they're hardworking boys. Well, they also, if they want to eat, they better get out there and do it, right? So you ask them why they're doing it, it's going to be a different story, right?
Right.
And so you ask yourself, like you brought up the next tech. You know, the next tech. I mean, we've got the tiger by the tail with this. I mean, and when I say that, I mean like we've got a hold to something here, unlike anywhere else in America. And that you would like to think it was from some prolific plan, but it really just started with me going to well, I was at the church one day and somebody called and wanted to know if I could come pick up their bicycle. And I said, "Yeah, but I'm on my Harley. Will it fit on the church van?" And they said, "Yeah." So I show up to the school, and this is Chris all the time. You know, I mean, the I'm a walking Duluth ad, right? And so, you know, I'm at the school, and here I am sticking two black girls in a white van, right? And the superintendent comes bebopping over to me, and he's like, "Hey, what's going on here?" You know, I mean, that was the right question to
Sure.
ask,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
And
Free candy.
yeah, yeah, and I was like, I had this ice cream and they really wanted it, you
Right.
know? No,
Right.
but so I explained it to him. He's like, "Oh, you're with the church." And I just asked him, I was like, "What would it look like if a church wanted to be involved with your school?" And he said, "Well, none's ever asked us." And I said, "Well, here's my card. Just give me a holler. If you got a question, if you think about it." So we went back. He called me in 2 weeks. I went back over there and had a conversation with him. And this is when I discovered that ultimately there is no vocational training available anymore of any substance, right? There's a lot of these little they use these acronyms STEM, CTE now, stuff like that are just kind of like Legos, right? They call it robotics, but it's basically Legos that you just kind of, drop some pre-programmed code in. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? It's no
Right.
different than like anyway, so that's not really get you anywhere, right? That may expose you to some things, but it doesn't really help you understand the mouse trap, right? And so I went over there, we started doing some things with them, and they asked us, could we do more? The first year they won the governor's award, right? And so we started doing more, and we started realizing, like, okay, let's migrate it to the church building. So we migrated it to the church building, and we're doing some things with them at nighttime. And I realized, like, this is just project based. I need to have a vision for long term. And so, like, I sat down in the shop we're in now, and I dug the footers. And I remember in the ditch, sitting on the. I mean, I've dug enough footers to go from here to Jackson back in my lifetime, and I remember sitting in those footers, and I've never prayed a prayer like this before. But I said, Lord, I know you've done big things before. Do them again in us. And we just want to show the world we're literally the only people that can validate that he's his goodness, right? Because if not, it's going to get attributed to everything else. And so here we are, right? I mean, the lights in the place, I paid for them and I hung them, right? The air conditioner, and it got to the point that, like last year, we had our open house at our place we're in now in Petal, and we were going to open it for 4 spaces in the fall, and there was over 50 people in line for 4 spaces. And we've never taken a dime from any kind of government agency or anything like that, and we've been able to fund it completely internally. And so every drill bit, every tap, every end mill, every indicator, everything, we've been able to pay for it up until now. And I went to the IMTS show, the International Machine Technology Show. It's only do it every 2 years at the McCormick Center in Chicago. It's just like one of these 4 million square foot places, right? And it was amazing to me that I had. I mean, you can see some of these interviews on our Instagram channel, but I had over $100 billion worth of companies stop me and say, "Hey, are you that preacher from Mississippi with the Votech School?"
Wow.
And I thought, Lord, keep teaching me. I'm just not learning my lessons yet. And I realize that Ephesians 3, verse 19, the Lord says, I'm able to do exceedingly abundantly beyond that which you can even conceive of. And I realize that I'm the limiting factor.
Right.
And so I step back and I ask myself these questions, from this, New Testament perspective, right? Because that's the only real thing that we know is truth, right? Is what the Lord give us in the Bible. And you look at this story as it unfolds, from Acts chapter 1 all the way to the end of the book of Acts. There's this unfolding, as it were, of the New Testament church as it rolls across the Roman Empire. And we're going to take a stop in Acts 9, and there's this little lady, Dorcas, at the end of the chapter. And you can read this. And she's in this town, and Peter's in Joppa, this next town over, and Dorcas dies. And these people are like, look, this is a tragedy that she died. Peter's in that next town over. Go get Peter, bring him over here. So they go get Peter, they bring him over there. Now, when they get there, they stand around and they're weeping. And it says they're kind of like, you can almost see them standing there like, look what she did, right? And it says she stand by holding the garments that she made. Now, just pause for historical understanding with this. When Jesus dies, they cast lots for his clothes. Remember this?
Made of one thread.
And so you think about this. Why would they do that? Well, it's because you're 1,400 years away from Lafleur inventing the modern loom, right? Where we can mass produce clothes, right? So a person would have maybe two garments. So Jesus was crucified with two thieves. To them, he was just another thief, right? Just somebody else there just running through the process, right? But if they can get his clothes, I'll just increase my clothing yield by 50%. When, like, nowadays you can take your wife's clothes out of the closet, a chunk this wide, put them in a bag, tote them to the Goodwill, and the only thing the closet is going to do is just kind of relax, you know what I mean, and fill the void. Well, here is Dorcas, right? This little sister that's making clothes. Now, I have to ask myself this question. I don't know how good, like, if you want to think you got a good ministry, just die and see if they won't let you stay dead. And I don't know how good you got to make britches for them not to let you stay dead, but Dorcas figured it out.
Right.
There's 67,000 soup kitchens in America today. Every church that I know of just about's got some kind of clothing pantry full of Meemaw's clothes that smell like mothballs and nobody wants. And we're not asking and answering the questions, how are we really going to make a difference? I mean, Jesus, the only miracle that's in all four of the Gospels is the feeding of the 5,000. And it's because it's real hard to understand what the Lord wants you to do when your belly's gnawed on your backbone.
Right.
So he takes a minute and feeds them fish sandwiches, right? Well, you can go anywhere in America today and you can get fed. I mean, you go to McDonald's and you walk in and you say, look, if I don't get something to eat in the next 15 minutes, I'm going to die. They're going to throw you $1 cheeseburger across the counter.
Right.
That's just, so what we have, what I believe that we've tried to do is ask and answer the question honestly. Are we really making a difference? Is there really something that we're building that is going to do something that is a real need that we can pour the gospel into the community with? Because he fed them fish sandwiches so he could say, listen, guys, there's some really powerful things you got to understand. I'm only going to be here for a minute. And then it's going to be up to you. You're going to have to drive this car. But I got to have a conversation with you while I'm here. And so the Next Tech Academy is born out of that the fact that we get to, we don't charge anything. Nobody gets paid, right? This is completely free. And so we start every one of our classes with a Bible study. And what we do with it is we articulate it in a way that, we're not going to just sit down and study the book of Hebrews. What we're going to do is we're going to make sure that when our students leave, that they can defend their faith. And what I mean by that is this. They need to be able to have a conversation in an articulate way that you don't sound like a nut job. You don't sound like some crazy, but you sound like somebody that's serious and can make a solid argument, because the biblical theological term is apologetics, right? And that means in the defense of, right? And apologia in Greek. And what we need to be able to do is just be convinced of something. I'm so thankful to live in the South. I mean, every bank you ride by's got a Bible verse on it, right? But that's cultural. Right. I mean, I got some friends of mine that were the first missionaries into the Soviet Union when the whole Western Bloc fell and the Iron Curtain opens and everything like that. And from a historical perspective, they enter this land and they don't even know who Jesus is historically, just as much as Alexander the Great, right? So how do you take a person, we're 2,000 years removed and hearing the stories our whole life living in the South, and I'm thankful right? And if you look at the statistics of who believes in the Bible today, whatever, you pull the American South and little pockets here and there out, and dude, that number goes to pot, right?
Right.
Because it's cultural. We're almost scared. Like, do you believe in Jesus? And people are kind of like, well, I mean, they're scared like he's going to lightning bolt them or
Right.
something, but they really haven't sit down and had this conversation. Why? Right? Why? Because culture is not good enough. Because what happened in Russia, we're just one generation away from that ourselves. If there's anything that the Bible proves out, is that it's always just one generation away. And so, what we want when our students leave is to be able to answer these questions when they say, the Bible's not true. Well, explain to me how. How is it not true? What does that mean? And so I want them to be fully convinced that the Bible is the only book that can prove itself true internally. Only book. There's no other book that you can take and prove itself internally true. The Bible can do that. There's no, and then on top of that, what is the Bible? What does it really mean to be a person of faith? The world has hijacked the term, right? In so many ways. I mean, like these bumper stickers, take a leap of faith. That's garbage, man.
Right.
I'm just going to tell you, matter of fact, that's what the devil tempted Jesus with in Matthew 4, right? Jump off of here and let the angels catch you. He says, you don't tempt the Lord your God. Faith is my understanding of what God wants me to do. Belief is the action. The Greek word for faith and belief are almost the same.
Right.
It's just the verb or the noun tense of it is all it is. And so the noun is the understanding, like I'm gonna meet with my financial guy in a couple of weeks. Let's check on Google stock. That's the noun, right? What's it selling for today? I don't know. Let's Google it. That's the verb form of it, right?
Right.
And so faith and belief are those. So what we want to do is make sure that we can provide this environment where you can fall down right now, and that's okay. This is the place to fall down because it's critical when you get to the world that you that you be able to articulate and have those conversations in a way that we can move the world forward, because ultimately the gospel is your only access to heaven. It's what gets you to know what the Lord wants you to do. It's what gets you to know his richness. It's what gets you all these things, right? That are these components of salvation. Well, it's incumbent upon somebody understanding what the Lord has done for them and what he wants to do for them. And so if you sound like you're crazy, or you can't do that, then we literally, like we started out, communication is the way that the Lord chose to save man. And he's going to ride that horse until he calls us home.
You're an excellent communicator, man. How have you sharpened that skill set to be able to do like what you're doing here now?
Well, I mean,
you're from Virginia, you're from the South.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thankful, I suppose, to some degree, to I preach at our church every other week, right? So we've got two other guys. One's a college guy, one's our youth guy, and I preach every other week. And but ultimately, I think a lot of those things, like is driven by. It's like if I told you to define passion, right? It'd be hard to articulate those words,
Mm-hmm.
but you know it when you see it, right?
Right.
And so, you have representation, right? So I don't need to, Mark 12 and verse 37, I think it says, and the common people heard him gladly. Jesus could talk to us about our mitochondrial DNA. He could talk to us about the proteins embedded into our cell structure that we don't even understand. We really
Right.
don't know why gravity works. Gravity's a law, but we don't know why it's a law, right? You drop something, only in the cartoons do you fall off a building when you look down. Every other time
Right.
you walk off, you fall off. Well, he could have talked to us about those things, but he didn't. What he did was he said, you know what? Have you ever tried to sow grass? You ever try to sow seed and some hits on that spot? Like you can see a spot at my granny's house on Google Maps now where so many generations of people have walked on it around the farm and the field that nothing will grow on it still, right?
Wow.
And he says, sometimes you throw grass and it falls on that spot like that. And then, sometimes that kind of pushed up stuff on the side, it'll grow up a little bit, but there's just it's not going to make it, right? And then you got the grass that falls in the place where it seemingly grows good, but there's just all these things that get a hold of it, these weeds and all this stuff. And it just, like weeds grow when it don't even rain,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Right.
And then he says, but there's just this one grass seed. There's that kind that falls on the right space and it's got all the things it needs to thrive, and it'll start yielding crops. And you ask people, which one do you want to be, right? Well, I want to be the good seed, right? Well, Jesus gives the qualifier behind it. He says the good seed is the one that bears fruit. And so what he does is he uses these very timeless and immutable stories that anybody anywhere can have this conversation. He doesn't need to have these big PhD level conversations. What we need to do is have a conversation, right?
Right.
And so I think that's the greatest power of being able to communicate is how to converse with people, right? And so when I try to have these conversations, I try to just think about like, what is it that we need to talk about and focus on that. Not what I want to talk about, but what do we need to talk about? And that's what the Lord did, right? He focused on what we needed to talk about. And so then it's up to me to figure out, who I'm talking to and in what way, right? I mean, you think
Right.
about it. Why can Jesus use tax collectors as this immutable story? Because there's never been a time in history where people are like, you know what, man, them old tax collectors is pretty good old boys. I believe I want to be one of them guys.
Right.
They've been the turd of history since time immemorial, right?
Right.
And so you got this way that he can articulate and just have this conversation. And that's all we got to do. We don't need to make this thing complicated. Just remember, like Acts 8 and verse 1, the disciples went everywhere teaching the word. They didn't even have it written down yet. Just think about that.
Yeah,
We're
that's
2,000
crazy.
years removed from the word being written, right? Well, about 1900. But they didn't have that. They just had to go and tell the story. Philip went down to Samaria and told them about Jesus, right?
Mhm.
Well, that's all we got to do. We don't have to make this thing complicated, but you can't live a busted up, crazy life, running around on your old lady and try to give marriage advice. You can't live in a squalor, scratching your fingers are gray from scratching lottery tickets and talk about how to manage your money. You
Right.
can't do those things, right? There's never going to be a point that you'll wean yourself off the blood of Jesus. It's not like, Chris, you've hit the pinnacle, man. Like I can start distributing it everywhere else now. I'm glad I was getting thin on it. Nope, I'll always need it. But what he needed from us was a way to show it, a way to show. Why would Paul write all these New Testament letters for? Is it because at some point they could wean themselves off? No, it's because we validate his goodness. When we look at our lives, I mean, Jesus, it's red pill or blue pill, right? I come to give you life and life more abundantly.
Abundantly.
So that's either true or it's not.
Right.
And if it's not true, why? You're not all in, right? So there's this power of how do we communicate this? How do we have this conversation? So I suppose that over time, because I know that the Lord chose this method of communication, that I've tried to be able to hone it and kind of sharpen it a little bit to be able to articulate it in a way that is beneficial.
So are most of your students like high school grade students or
Yeah. So they're that 15 to 18-year-old range. But what we're going to do with the new place is, because we bought a new place and just because we couldn't contain where we're at, and it's just the richest blessings of God has come with this. But I've there's just a lot of blessings, and so we're moving into a new place, and one of the things that's allowed us this in the new place is we'll do a workforce development. So, like Friday, I'm going to meet with a couple companies in town and figure out exactly what we can do to, as an aggregate, like, what all y'all need, and let's put it together and look at it. And we'll do a 26-week workforce ready, right? So now it's 2 years, right?
Mhm.
But 26 weeks, you won't get quite the comprehensive side of it, but you'll be able to get the component of it to where you'll know enough to be a competent employee. And so I'll meet with those guys in the fall. We'll actually bring in the adults, right? And our intentions were to start a Hispanic side of it too.
Oh, cool.
But the immigration thing has gotten, I've been through this process several times. It's exhaustingly bad right now. And so, we can't really put stock in that. And I speak Spanish, right? But it's just tying up. It's
I'm
just,
not surprised,
well,
man.
look, man, I've been doing mission work for 15 years. So if you couldn't do it after 15 years, you probably ought to kick rocks and find something else to do,
Did
So
you just learn it doing mission work?
yeah, I mean, that's the way you learned English.
Just get thrown in there and
Yeah, when I was in school, did they make y'all take a foreign language?
I mean, dude, it was very minute. One class,
Yeah, and
nothing repetitive.
you got an A too, right?
Right,
Isn't that a government school model at
right,
best? You know, like
right.
you didn't get anything out of it, you still got an A, and it's useless
Took
to
a
you, right?
test and on to the next
Yeah,
thing.
exactly. Well, immersion is the way that you like. You know, when you're little and your old man's like, "Go get that 9/16 wrench."
Right,
You know, you understood go and get, and then you understood wrench. Then you had to understand. You know, there's this
right.
component of you know, this kind of evolution that you get in your language. And so that's the way you learn any language, is just through immersion. So after 15 years, I mean, I
That's
ought to be
funny
able
you
to.
say that because I never learned to read a tape measure. I just by doing things like that, you just
And that's the way it
put it
works, right?
together. Right.
Yeah, that's the way it works. And so, yeah, so we're gonna have to table the Hispanic side until we get this immigration foolishness worked. We even had a guy we were working with, but it's just so much politics in this, and I hate politics.
Right.
But it was just a lot of it, you know, that's going to complicate things right now, and so we're just going to kind of pump the brakes on the.
Do you find the younger guys can learn faster than the older guys?
I don't know yet,
Oh, that's true.
and the I don't know what the question. I don't. So you know, I run a pretty tight ship, right?
I would
And
imagine.
and you know, there's no horseplay, and I set that rule. You don't get to determine what horseplay is. I do, and you know, so and we're always going to have our Bible study together. There's just a few things that are absolutes, right? And you know, you throw a bunch of like tomorrow morning there'll be 10, 15, 16, 17-year-old boys in there, right? And
Right.
and you know, sometimes you have to remind them, I'm the one running the show, and but I don't know how that dynamic will face with the adults. I assume that where it will work is that if they're coming, they're ready for a change, right?
Are these going to be more like underprivileged adults or
Well, what it is so like we're 300,000 jobs short of machinists in America today. The Mississippi, Mississippi, we get $3.8 for every dollar we pay into the federal government system. In Virginia, I think we paid 92 cents for every dollar we got in, right? And so what that means is Mississippi, while I appreciate we are very morally conservative, we don't realize in Mississippi that we're hyper liberal with our politics. And what I mean by that is the intrusion and the amount that we depend on everybody else to support us, right? And so what I've discovered is there is everybody in Mississippi to some degree is on some I mean, there's some kind of subsidization with everything that we do in Mississippi, right? And what that has done is created so many layers of the government that the government literally entity exists to kind of feed, the snake eating its tail. And I could tell you some stories about some troubles we've had, but it's incumbent upon us probably not to have those conversations. But so underprivileged, I can't even say that. What I can say is this: is that the Mississippi Department of Labor and all that. They put out these statistics. Just machinists. Now, there's a lot of categories. You got tool makers, machinists, fabricators, all these things that go into that category. But just the ones that are labeled as machinists, we have 307 jobs that will be needed every year for the next 10 years. We're 3,000 short. We're 300,000 short in America. And by 2030, before Trump took office, now this is not has any, um, no factors go into this formula about the tariffs and landing jobs and everything like that. We'll be over 2 million jobs short by 2030. So something's got to give, right? Something's got to give. And so what you're seeing now is there's an exponential growth in pay, and which that means that as we land more jobs, there will be, I mean, let's just face it, all the manufacturing's coming to the South, right? It's moving out of the North. It's coming to the South. We just don't have as much regulation, as many problems with unionization, all the
hmm
things that the North has kind of languished under. And so as that stuff migrates to the South, they're going to be looking for people to fill those jobs. Well, that's where we come in, right? We'll be able to do that. We'll do that. And not only will we do that, but you'll enter the workforce because, like our motto, we follow 2 Timothy 2:2. Paul said, "The things I commit to you, commit to faithful men who will be able to teach others also." So you get about 5 generations in that verse, right? And so our motto is we don't win until we all win. So our senior kids actually teach our junior kids because I'm driving home this idea that you have got to elevate.
Yeah, dude, that's cool.
And so when you enter the workforce, you've got to be thinking about ways that you can make the place better. right? Whether that means through production, don't be the Karen, don't be fussing and complaining about everything all the time. Be the change that you got. I mean, all these things we're just constantly driving home. Well, what's going to happen is as we move through this, as the wages continue to rise, the demand will continue to grow. And so, right now the wages are, I mean, they're still really, I mean, there's companies that have, a company called me from Jackson the other day and said, look, we'll just hire every one of them right now. We'll start them at $24 an hour and give them a quarter hour raise for the next year every month. And then after that, $1 a year. Well, I mean, you take a kid he said they're set, we'll take them at 17. You take a kid at 17 making $25 an hour, eating mom and daddy's bologna sandwiches, that's pretty good money. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? And so you just then increased your exponential lifetime earning potential there. And so, because we get to dictate the terms of surrender, what I mean by that is that if you want to be part of the Next Tech Academy, we want you to be part. But you've got to understand that the demand is overwhelming. So just your ability, like I've had mamas and daddies call me and be like, my son is so smart, but and try to credentialize me. And I'll just tell them, ma'am, I appreciate that, but that doesn't put him at the top of the list with us. We're interested in changing your family. And that's what we're after is change and the real kind. And when you talk about the kind that rattles in your pocket.
Right.
And so, what we get with what we've created is the ability to say, we don't think you're a candidate because we don't get no money, ain't no pay. We can choose whoever we want to do. And so we only want to produce the best out of it. And so, I don't know how that dynamic will change, when I get a bunch of 20, 30, 40-year-old guys. But I mean, like we've got kids, mamas that are wanting to do this now. Right. And so I'm just saying that's when I say we got the tiger by the tail, we got it. And so we just got to figure out how to dance with it.
So you talking when you say that dance with it, like how to scale it, or
Yeah, not necessarily how to scale it, but how to facilitate everything. Because I don't care about quantity. I just don't care.
just quality?
Yeah, this is about actual, real change, and so there has to be a balancing act, right? I mean, I just went live this week, so. The second law of thermodynamics is that everything is seeking to normalize, right? So you put a cup of coffee in the room in here, it may be 110 degrees, but it's eventually whatever y'all got the temperature in here at, that's what it's going to be, right? And that's why steel rust, because it's trying to go back to its base form, right? Everything is trying to go back to constantly,
never
right?
stops.
So Heidenhain, a German company, they reached out to us. They make the meter for the world, right? So, every 2 years we have to remake the meter. Even though it doesn't look like it's changed, it's coming apart atomically constantly, right? So they remake the meter for the world every 2 years. Well, they also make controls for machines. Well, they reached out to us and they said, hey, we saw your video on your church's website. We'd like to be a part of this. So they sent us controls for our machines. And I got the nosing around in the background of the controls and I figured out a way to control them remotely. And so I've got this product that we just went live with this week, and it's a remote control controller. And the idea behind it is that we will use that as a component of funding the school. Every red cent is just going to go
I
back
was
to
just
the
wondering
school.
how you don't want to monetize any of these ideas you have.
Well, there is a monetization, but I mean, I'll just tell you this. I was thankful to make money when I lived in Virginia. And like once a year, man, we'll do like we'll invite everybody in and we'll mill your slides. We'll just mill Glock slides on a Saturday. We'll throw some chicken on the grill or something like that. We'll mill Glock slides. The program's 19 minutes and 52 seconds. Those guys get $200 to $400 to mill a Glock slide, right? I can set it up and do them every 20 minutes, right? And it's a way that we can get the community, hey, let's just invite your buddies. Let's have a Bible study. It's going to be all dudes. Let's have a Bible study about being a man. Let's have a Bible study about being a parent, a father, right? And I'll tell you this, that I remember the first one we did. At the end of the day, I didn't think about how much time. I didn't think about how much effort it took. But I did think about how much money I walked away from. Right? That I could have done those and I could have made $6,000-8,000 that day if I wanted to. So you know what that reminds Chris is that old guy Bo, if I don't keep the chemo to him, I mean, he's just in remission. You understand what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So if I don't keep him dead, he's coming back, right? And so I just can't worry about that anymore. I mean, by all intents and purposes, we should not exist as an entity. But I'm telling you, we are nationally known. I had a CEO of a company that picked up. I had a Zoom call with him the other day from Miltronics USA, one of the biggest machine tool manufacturers in America. He's in Indianapolis. He picks up my card. He says, Chris, we're hearing bits and pieces of what you guys are doing all over the place. He said, we want to be a part of this. We're sending you 2 brand new machines. And he looked at me and he said, man, I don't care if we sell a single machine out of your shop. He said, I just believe in what you're doing so much. And I said, that's the kind of partnerships we need. I don't need to resell somebody on the vision every 2 years, right? And so monetization, yes, but it's just a conduit back to the school. I don't keep any of the money, right? And so this MPG manual pulse generator, this controller that we came up with, the day it went live, I mean, like I had the largest distributors of those controls in America call me and say, we want sole distributorship. The next phone call was from Cummins, and so the ultimately, and I got a friend of mine that's an attorney in Jackson, and I just talked with him about it, like what's the best play, because I don't want to be a sales guy. And when Rodney Dwayne is done, drop the controller over here, knock the switch off of it or something like that. I don't want to be in the middle of a Bible study or doing something like this where we have eternal consequences to go be customer service, right? Because his boss is chewing his tail for it, right? So I don't want to do any of those things, but I do want to fund the school, right? And I do want to do it, and I want us to learn lessons. You know what I mean? It's not just about like making machinists and discipling, but like, man, what if we approach this thing just the chips in the middle of the table? Like, I'm going to heaven. It's a real place. I don't pretend that it's real. I don't need to fake it till I make it. You know what I mean? Like, it's real. And so what if we just slid the chips in the middle of the table? We're like, Bo, let's go. And so that's why I've done this, like this MPG controller, right, as a way that we can fund it. And I've already got the second and the third evolution of it in the pipe, so that, that will help us to retain somebody won't want to nudge us out, right? Elon famous for saying patents are for people that are scared, right? And so you just got to think through the problem.
And every problem you solve, you create 10 more.
Yeah, but that's fine, right? I mean, and so all of those things just have to be, they're just another layer, to get in heaven.
There you go. That's wild. I mean, you would think the meter company that sent you then would be wanting to buy that from you.
You know what's crazy is, so they're German, right? And the Germans, man, like, I don't know if you ever had a foreign car, like a Beamer or Mercedes or something like that. Dude, they suck. I mean,
oh, come on, man.
I don't mean to hurt your feelings, but like, I just
got a German-made one out there, bro.
I saw it, and that's why I picked on you. But like, the way that they approach problems is totally different than everybody else, right? So you're not just going to have like, a 93 Fox body Mustang is going to have a casting, and you're going to put a pipe clamp on your water fill line from your radiator. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like that one, it's got a special molded product that with the hose and everything that reaches around this and does that. So when it craps out, you got to have this molded, articulated piece. Well, that's the way the Germans approach every problem, right? And so what we've done with our controller is, for example, is that this feature is already available on hyper, $200,000-$300,000 machines. It's kind of like if we roll back to 2004, if you wanted navigation and Bluetooth, you had to get one of them cars like you got out there in your garage. Mm-hmm. You ain't gonna get it on a Honda Civic, right? Well, what happened is everybody got used to navigation and Bluetooth on everything, so now it's on everything, right? We're the ones that are grabbing that market of all these machines that are down here that are the vast, overwhelming majority of machines, right? How many Honda Civics are out there versus how many, Mercedes Hummers like you got out there, right? And so you think about that, so what we're looking to do is we realize that the tide is going to go that way because technology is going to get there. So we're just going to define the market, right? And so that's what we're trying to do with it.
That's cool, man. So you're building a new building. Is that something you're funding now by yourself?
Well,
I mean, I ain't trying to
No, no,
ask you
that's
stuff you don't want to answer.
no, no,
But
no, man. Look,
a business guy like me has got to wonder, like, man, that's amazing. You got the heart to do that. First
well,
of all, and then everybody's like, well, dang, man, how much is he spending? Is he gonna make it to the end with what he's spending? Because
well, and I'll tell you this,
or do
like,
you just don't even worry about that stuff?
I don't say I worry about it, but I do say that I mean, I have I meet with my finance guy for a reason, right? And
Like these controllers, you ain't gonna say 3%'s fine or nothing like that.
no,
Dude, you got a good heart,
no,
man.
I don't care about it, right? Because I mean, our price point's $1,000 on them, and if we sell 25,000, you can do the math,
Right.
right? And but the new building, so I'm one of the evangelists for the Kensington Woods Church of Christ, and the Churches of Christ, we don't have like it's real common in most denominations to have like a synod or a convention or a diocese, like this theologically, it's called a sacerdotal hierarchy, right?
Here you
And
go again,
it's
man.
just it just means that there's this like up the pipe scenario, right?
Right.
That's why you've seen now. It used to be like the community churches were kind of independent,
Mm-hmm.
right? Now they're falling under these little conventions and stuff like that now, right? And so the churches of Christ truly are autonomous. And so praise God, but I've had enough money come from different churches of Christ and members that we've bought the building outright. We owe no debt on it. And we're about, I don't know, 70% done with the renovations in it right now. I'm hoping to be done with it by the end of the month. And I think that you know, we may have to stretch a little bit to get there, but we'll get there.
Are you like project managing the build out and all that
Yeah.
as well?
Yeah, I mean, building is, I mean, like I said, I was a class A builder in Virginia and which means no cap. You can do. I mean,
Right.
like when I was taking my test, the guy beside of me was like, "What are you here for?" I was telling him, he's like, "Well, I'm fixing to build on the Lane Stadium. That's where the Hokies play, the Virginia Tech Hokies, so that's the kind of the level, right?" And so, a project like this is it's just
Right.
management, and get your workers and everything like that, lined up and everything. And so, and like tomorrow, to this afternoon, I'm gonna go over and pull wire. Thursday, 3 or 4 of us from church are going to get together and finish the wiring into place, and maybe, I had to move the plumbing in a couple spots, where the stinking government wants you to have ADA
Right.
bathrooms all over the place. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I know that there's we're scared we may have a rash of machinists in wheelchairs, and so
I'm
we
sure it's
must,
5 by 5, man.
yeah. So you feel me?
Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
So that's where we're at, But I'm managing, and I think that, we've hired a grant writer from California to where, like, I met with the Pentagon last week, and
Come on, bro.
the so I met with some guys at the Pentagon last week, and to try to get a temperature, of like, I'm thankful for everything that Doge is doing, right? But there will be, inadvertently, there will be people like you see all these videos about these immigrants getting deported and this poor family that got caught up. I mean, that stuff's just going to happen. There's just going to be stuff that it gets messed up. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so I met with those guys at the Pentagon from the Navy, and I think there may be a funding opportunity for us there, and we're looking into some various foundations and grants and stuff like that. And so I'm trying to, you know, figure out the best way to do it all. Mississippi's got some unique funding strategies too, and so I'm gonna try to figure out the best way. But it's just weird to me because, like, you would think politicians would be all over something like this because they requires nothing from them, but yet they can say, like, look at the people in our area,
Right.
that they're doing. And
Well, dude, I'd never heard of you.
well, I've kind of kept it at bay. You know what I mean? Because I needed to get the process down, the product down, right? Because what you're selling is human capital. You got what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And so when you're going to sell human capital, that is not as verifiable as if I'm doing the QC work on a
Yeah.
mic body. You got what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And so I needed to make sure that I strategically did that so that when I say, here you go.
Are you talking about like being accredited?
Yeah, so that's one of the things that we're looking. So, like, Mississippi's got two kind of a couple ways, but so, like, a small business owner, like, what's the name of your farm here?
Oh, Mississippi Grass Farms.
Mississippi Grass Farm. So you as an individual can't pay your in state income tax, but your ad valorem that will be required for, and you know how much you write a check for Tate Reeves for. And so if we're accredited, Mississippi has two kind of ways. Like they have an ESCO and an ESO, to where these two, one of them is if you're an accredited like private school, like First, what's this Presbyterian school over here, whatever it's called, or the Catholic school in town,
Right.
they can get money. So you could put half of your ad valorem, your taxes, you got to pay the government towards that school, right? But there's some caveats to it. Number one, Jackson sets how much the entity can get, right? So the Next Tech Academy, they'll set the cap. And number two, they're only going to allow $9 million of all the business revenue to go into it. So that means that it's up to me to make sure that whenever it goes live, you're sitting there pecking that button, right, to make sure that your name gets in the pot. Because if you don't make it, I don't make it, right? And the other side of it is there's a one that's with CPS, or I don't know what we call it, or like like they take your kids from you. I don't know what they
Right.
call it in Mississippi, but the where we actually have ended up with a couple of kids that are adopted kids, and so we see that as a strategic way that we can partner with those guys that, like, you let me know, because like most of the time families that adopt kids, they're pretty invested in the success of their family. You know
Right.
what I mean?
Yeah.
And so what we would like to do is become a partner with them, to where like you have a kid that, like, you want I mean, let's just face it, man. I mean, like, not everybody's college material.
Right.
And I'll say this, the majority of the people don't need to be.
Right.
That's just the way it needs to be. We just don't need the majority of the people getting Game Boy degrees and psychology degrees, because what we do is we flood the market with people that the only thing they're really qualified to do is ask you if you want fries with it. And so, we've got to figure out a way that we can parlay this into a strategic opportunity for us to partner with those guys. Because like I checked, like when the schooling ESCO thing, the guy said it was completely filled up in 47 seconds.
For years.
Yeah, for the schools in
Oh yeah.
general,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But I said, well, what about the adoption deal over here? You hear him like pecking, pecking, pecking. He's like, it's still got all the money in it.
Wow.
So nobody's even tapped into it. So it's just about, for us, it's just about strategic ways that we can look at this and approach the problem and be able to do it. But only one I can really hedge my bets on is me.
Dude, you're doing it,
That's the
man.
only one I can bet on.
Will you ever venture out into any other trades besides machining?
Yeah. So that's a question I get asked a lot.
I mean, I saw you do you do use CAD or
yeah,
whatever.
all that. So for us, what we'll do is we'll eventually develop a capstone program, and it's in our 1, 3, 5, 10-year plan, and business plan, as it were. And because we're just burning through 3 years in like 6 months, it seems like, right? And so what we'll do is, because I'll be able to prayerfully exercise some of those industry contacts. Like if you think about Fanuc, FANUC, you see these little yellow robots like welding a car and stacking up something or whatever. That's Fanuc. They're the biggest player in it. Well, I can call one of their VPs right now and get him on the phone, right? So we're going to try to leverage into a capstone program metrology, which is the science of measuring things; mechatronics, which is the way we mechanize. That's real robotics, right? And then the third one is like industrial maintenance, servos, PLCs, things like that, to our capstone program. And what that will do is, like, one of our kids whose daddy's a doctor here in town, he's going to school to Mississippi State. He's going to graduate and go to Mississippi State this year as an engineer. And what we'll be able to allow is we'll become like with Fanuc, Hood Industries right here. The president's a member of our church, and they've got one of their plants they're completely mechanizing. That'd be hands off, right? I think it's a plywood plant. Anyways, everything in that plant will be robotic, made with robots, right? And well, all that sounds well and fine. He's like, well, the robot's going to take our job. No, the robots will cause us to evolve our jobs.
Right.
Because you got to have somebody that can repair them. You got to have somebody that can program them. You got to have somebody that, all these components
Right.
of it, right? It's no different than we stopped using a sickle and went to a hay bind.
That's right.
You know what I mean? And so, we've had to evolve our jobs is what we've had to do. And so I remember when we all used square bales. And then and then it was like round bales, right? And it's like, dadgummit, sure would have been nice in the 80s, to not have
Right.
to spend all summer long on a hay wagon, right?
Right.
Well, what that calls us to do is just evolve our job. It's still just as much need for hay.
Right.
We've just figured out a different way to get it out there, right? And so the companies that will survive will be the ones that understand their environment. So we'll become, for example, the only certified Fanuc training facility from, Mississippi State now, from like the Tupelo, Columbus, up in that region of the state all the way to the coast. And so that's one of the ways. But yeah, we'll evolve. And I've had people ask me, like a lady's a member of our church. She said, "Well, what about a nursing thing?" Sarah Small's her name. And I said, "Remember, this is about getting people to heaven. So if in 5 years, if the government has realized they have really dropped the ball and they overwhelm us, they got billions of dollars they can throw at this. That's okay. I have no pride in this. If this thing needs to burn to the ground, that's okay. We'll rise, whatever needs to do to rise out of the ashes, because I'm getting to heaven. And so whatever we got to do, this is not about teaching a people a trade. This will be a component of it,
Right.
but this is about real serious change. And so, yes, there are already conversations about how we can evolve. And the place we bought, we've got plenty of space that we can grow. We can throw another 10,000 square foot building up tomorrow. I mean, it's already graded flat. All I got to do is strip the topsoil and put the form boards up and rock on, baby. And so there's even a place to evolution wise grow the facility too.
What's the first step you think it is for somebody to change?
The same principle applies in every situation. The first rule of getting out of a hole: stop digging. I don't care what you think you need to do. The boys come and got me the other day, and they had the tractor. I'd sent them down to get the forks on the tractor or the bucket or something like that. And man, they had the tractor mired up almost to the muffler. You understand what I'm saying? Because all this rain we done had. And I've told them it took me probably 75 cinder blocks of stacking under the bucket, then stacking under the tires, stacking under the bucket, stacking under the tires, just to get the tractor out of the edge of the pond, right? So if somebody wants to change, the first rule is stop digging. You got to realize that what you're doing is what got you in the spot you're in is the thing that you have to stop right now, no matter what. Stop digging.
So become aware.
Yeah, and just realize that like this whole component and change is something that if you're not constantly doing,
repetition,
dude, you're just paddling water in the middle of the ocean, right? I mean, like Jesus tells this story in Luke 13, and beginning about verse 1, he says, "There were those present that day whose blood Pilate had mingled with their sacrifices." And he looks at the crowd and he says, "Do you suppose these Galileans were any worse sinners than those in Judea or anywhere else?" And the reason why is because these politicians, like, this dude is just taking a pig and mingled it with their. He has desecrated their sacrifice, right?
right?
And you may look at it and think, like, how bad do you have to live for somebody to come along and mess your sacrifice up, right? Because something happens to us. The first thing we say is things like, "Why me?
Right.
Why am I in the situation I'm in?" Right? And Jesus says, "Look, Pilate did that. Those people didn't do that." He says, let me just ask you a question. And he says, verse 3, he says, "But I tell you this, unless you repent, you'll all likewise perish." Not just the people who messed up the sacrifice, not just the people whose sacrifice got messed up, but we all got to change. And then in verse 4, he says, "What about the tower in Siloam who 18 people fell on? Do you suppose that they were any worse sinners than all these other people?" I mean, why do towers fall? I mean, Bo, there's a lot of reasons, right? Bad soil, bad work, bad, the tornado. I mean,
Right.
there's a lot of reasons why towers fall. And he says, look, Ecclesiastes 9 and verse 11 says, "Look, I've seen it all. The race isn't to the swift, nor the battle to the strong, but time and chance happen to us all." I mean, sometimes things just happen, right? So he goes back in verse 5 and he says it again. "I tell you, no, unless you repent, you'll all likewise perish." And so there has to be, the biblical word is repentance, right? And that sounds like a fancy theological term, but it really just means change.
Right.
I mean, if you look at Genesis 6 in the King James Version, I'm not really a King James guy, like we all were, in the 80s, right?
Right.
But the King James version in Genesis 6, it says God repented of making man. Well, that would, in our mind's eye, sometimes it means because we've put such a nasty connotation that meant that God did something wrong. No, no, no. It literally just means God changed his direction. Right, so Genesis 6 is where you're going to see the flood story. God changed his direction, like we're going to hit the reset button, right, with Noah and his 3 boys and their wives. And so, first rule is just realizing, man, quit digging. Get out the hole. It's okay. Change is inevitable, right? And so for us, it's like, okay, you can either fight to stay who you are or fight to become who you need to be, but both of them are a struggle.
People would rather defend who they are than.
Yeah, that's right. No doubt.
That's good stuff, man. Because that's, whether it's fitness or
Whatever.
it's the same. You got to become aware,
That's right.
and then stop what you're doing, stop the bad habits and replace them with good ones, and then
Yep.
repetitively,
Quit digging.
That's right. And man, it's so simple, but we overcomplicate it.
Well, and it's because the reason why we overcomplicate it is because you got about 5 seconds. Psychologically, you got about 5 seconds from the time you say, I'm gonna go check the mail. I'm gonna go cut the grass. I'm gonna go whatever the case may be. You got about 5 seconds. Your brain starts telling you, don't do that.
Yep. Your subconscious.
It's saying you don't need to do that thing.
That's right. Because it wants to stay comfortable.
Yeah, it wants to stay comfortable, man. I don't
comfort
know if it's
don't like
preservation of
change.
calories or
Yeah.
I don't know what it is, man. But 5 seconds, you got about 5 seconds where your mind starts talking you out of everything.
Do you think that's our flesh?
Oh, absolutely, dude. That's why Paul would say, like, man, the things that I want to do, I just don't do them, and I hate that, right? And the things that I don't do, I ought to be doing, I never do them, and I don't know why I fight. He's showing that there's just eternal struggle with man, right? There's this fleshly side that is just constantly looking. It's like a squirrel, Bo.
Mm-hmm.
What captures my eye next, and
Right.
and he's saying this other spiritual side that you really. That's why you think about it, man. Like all these social agendas and everything like that. That's a tickle of the spirit. You got what I'm saying? That's a
Mhm.
tickle on the spiritual side because you realize that you're part of change and you're helping people, right? Well, you're not really part of change. You're part of a stigma of change.
Right.
The gospel is the great unifier. And it's the way that real change happens. So it doesn't matter any kind of social agenda, whether it's some immoral thing or whether it's some political thing or whatever the case may be, none of those things really matter anywhere. And so when we have these Satan is real good about packaging these fleshly things that make us think we're doing these spiritual things, right? And so it's up to us to determine what are real spiritual things and what are these fleshly things.
It's good stuff, man. That would be like your discernment you'd be using, spiritual discernment.
Yeah, man. Just and really you got this filter, right? I mean, one of the things I teach the kids how to do is to ring a grinding wheel, right? You take a big grinding wheel, it's just held together by silica and epoxy and all these kind of mediums, and it's just squished and heated and it does its job. Well, the only way you know that grinding wheel is safe is if you were the last one to use it. The second way is by ringing it. You can just take a wrench and you can tap it on the side, and the grinding wheel sounds a certain way. If it's got a crack, you may not see the crack, but if it's got a crack or a break in it somewhere, I mean, it's going to come apart at 3,400 RPMs. And depending on how big it is, you just figure out the inertia and joules of force and energy and all those things. So the blessing is like, look, I don't have to know everything. I just have to know how it sounds, right? I don't have to know where that crack is, but if I can run it through this filter of, Lord, what is it that you want us to do? Well, I want you to tell everybody about me. And I want you to just forget about all your preconceived ideas of who is going to become a Christian and who's going to obey the gospel and who's going to do the right thing. You don't worry about all that stuff. You just get out there, you beat the bushes and shoot the rabbits that run out. I'll take care of those things. And so you approach it from that standpoint. Then anything else that I'm burning my energy on, it's just taking me off course.
How do you know when like you're living a really faith-based life? You're a real example of that, but it does take some planning and organizing. When do you feel like, man, I'm starting to overplan? I need to get back on faith. Like, that stuff I battle with every day. It's like,
Dude,
man,
me too,
I'm
man.
over planning.
Yeah, I know the same way. So like, here's what happens for me. Like I was giving you this kind of spiritual temperature of the Mill and the Glock slides, right? That was a moment to let me know that, Chris, you're still not over making money. And I'm not saying it's wrong to make money. Don't get me wrong.
Right.
But I just know that when I was working 80 hours a week for 20 years, I mean, I still did a lot of things for the Lord, right? But I know I could have done more. And really all I did was just push the decimal place further to the east in my bank account, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, I mean, we have these spiritual, like, so this next tech thing, like, I write, I have a prayer journal. You know, this is my remarkable. I keep it with me every day, and so I write my prayers down, right, and so that I can go back and study my prayers. And what I mean by that is that the Bible is real clear that anything that you ask, I will give you, if it's not vain. And so we say, like, well, God said no. He never says no. He always says yes. And so it just means that I'm not asking the right thing, right? So I write down my prayers so I can study them. Like I can look back. Like, so I prayed and prayed and prayed and prayed and prayed about this funding source, the pendant, becoming a funding source, all these things. Well, now I'm here, right? But what I realized is I didn't pray about what I would do when I got there.
Mm.
You got what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So now it's like,
I got to be in order to become.
yeah, yeah. And so like how do I evolve that, right? And so and you go through these kind of like what happens is you get bogged down in details. Like I'm sure for you
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
like planting season and
Mm-hmm.
all
Yeah.
these things that just are like this move taking a lot of my time, right? And at the same time you have
But it's
15
part of the growth.
but it's part of the growth, right? And so you hit these valleys,
Yeah.
right? And
I'm there now, man.
and dude, I'm just coming out of one, right? I'm just coming out of one, and I say that because, you have to have these capture moments. I'm digging my hole. I'm digging my hole with logistics. First rule: stop digging. Right?
I heard a guy say only thing you start on top is digging a hole.
That's right. That's right. And so I'm just easing out of it now in the sense like, okay, Lord, I mean, you've brought us this far. I don't need to carry this thing across the goal line. You know the red zone. I don't need to know all the details.
Do you feel like your life is more abundant now that you've gave so much?
I,
People's got to be wondering that about you. I am like, man, this guy has gave a lot more than I ever have thought to do.
well, I don't even mean to imply that I've gave a lot.
I know, man, but
I don't even mean to imply that. But
everybody in the room's thinking like, dang, bro, that's bold, man.
well, it's more
Like,
about
are you getting broker because you're doing this?
I
Or
can't say that, right? I mean, like, here's a crazy thing. Like my wife said the other day, she was like, Chris, it's obvious we make a lot less money now than we did in Virginia, but it seems like we have more.
Wow.
And I can't explain those things to you anymore, right?
I've heard that time and time again.
And like I could sit down and try to start targeting how all these kind of things happened, but I'm still learning this lesson. Like Paul said, I've not yet arrived, right? Because this old world we live in, it revolves around a dollar. I mean, the buying power of gold hasn't changed in 1,000 years.
Right.
You roll back 1,000 years, an ounce of gold will buy you about a month, right? Well, today it'll buy you about a month of living, right? The buying power of gold has not changed, but certainly, right? We in America buy $20 trillion worth of the world's products every year. That's why the tariff conversation is such a big conversation on the world economy, right? But that's capitalism. You got me?
Mm-hmm.
Well, the second side of that is like I have to live in this world, right? You have to live in this world, and at the same time, like I got 3 boys that all live at home. My oldest son is 16, and so I've got these 3 boys that I've got to get through life, and what it's done is it's made me think about the way that I do everything now, right? So like even legacy. Like one of the things that we thought about, and I didn't even think about this, but because my family has so many problems with like drugs and alcohol and everything like that. I mean, when meth hit the mountains, Bo. I mean, have you seen Have you seen the movie Lawless?
Yeah.
Okay,
love it.
So
I tried to cut my hair like them before you got here.
We carried our trash off to where they're from.
Really?
That's literally where I'm from.
Trying to think of the name of the town. I used to watch that movie every day.
Yeah, so it's literally where I'm from, right? I mean, like literally from that whole, Arat, Ferrum.
What about the wild, wonderful whites of West Virginia?
That's a little bit off. Like they left the family. Like it's almost bred into us to.
So if I shook a pill bottle, you'd know that was a mating call.
Yeah, exactly. And so for us, I've learned now how to remeasure abundance. You got what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Is I've learned now how to really measure abundance. And
would that be like your Like your fruits of the spirit, joy, peace.
Because like I can look now and I can watch my boys, right? I can go by and hear one of my boys on the phone having a Bible study with one of his
Oh
friends,
wow.
right? And I can know that there are these things that I'm investing in now that I'm really laying up treasures for myself in heaven, right? And you and I have probably lost as much money in the last 2 days to buy most people's houses, the last week. You know what I mean? In the market.
Yeah. I'll be going through. I just sniff it as it goes by. I say that every podcast.
And but you see what I'm
Yeah.
saying? And but really all those things are just number on paper, you know? And so now what I can say is that I've learned how to differently measure what abundance is now. And part of it, I suppose part of it, I just had to get over being poor, you know? I mean, I grew up getting my water out of a spring. And so, I suppose that I just had to get over being poor and realize that, like, I mean, like all the things that I wanted, I mean, I got them. You know,
That goes deep, man.
yeah, I mean, and so like, what is the next I want? Like you saw my old truck. I don't really care about having a new truck. That's just
Right.
not a big deal to me. And the newest vehicle I got's my Harley, and it's a 2014.
Wow.
And so I just it's just not that important to me. And I'm not saying that I'm the measuring stick. You got what I'm saying?
Right.
I'm not saying that you measure by Chris. I mean, 2 Corinthians chapter 10 and verse 12, Paul says, it's one of these mouthful verses, but he says it like this. He says, we dare not compare ourselves to ourselves, because those that compare themselves to themselves, in doing so, they become unwise. I cannot compare horizontally. I flat out don't care if you got 10 cars. I don't mean that like from a self-righteous perspective. It don't move the needle for me.
Right.
I
Right.
just don't care. And so for us as a family, we realize, so that's why we have these, like, every night we have these Bible time together as a family, right? And so that we can focus as a family. Every single night we're going to do this together. And we can have this conversation. I mean, we even wrote, like, we did this for our church because we want daddies leading, right? You want daddies to be the ones that are pulling the reins, right? And so what we did was, like, we spent 3 years just every month studying a characteristic: honesty, integrity, independent workers, all these things, courtesy, all these. You may look at that and say that's a piddly little sissy principle. I'm gonna tell you right now, you start instilling those things in your family, and you will change the dynamic of it. And I mean, we're gonna have to build a new building this year, and so we're thankful. But I would say that, to answer your question, yes. But the long answer is just, how do you measure it now, right?
Right.
And so certainly it's taken a lot of effectivo cash, right? And but ultimately it's just about, how do I measure my abundance now?
Dude, thanks for coming today. I
Man,
think you're like a real life angel.
a fat one.
Well, will you come back later in the future?
Yeah, just give me a holler. I'll try to work it in.
I want to see where you've gotten in about a year.
Yeah, give me a
Not where
holler.
you've gotten, where the
I
Lord's gotten through you, brother.
look at the way you're saying that. That's so
Yeah.
awesome.
All right, man. Well, thanks for coming, Chris Donovant.
Donovant. Yeah.
Man, I botched that. Chris Donovant.
Yeah.
Where can everybody find you, man? Do you want people keeping up with Next Tech Academy?
Yeah,
I know
I mean,
you're kind of flying under the radar a little bit.
Yeah, we're ready to throw the doors open now, right? And
Okay.
so what we need is, just from a social media standpoint, right? So I happen to know the guy so the Nielsen company is, we think about them about ratings or whatever, right? But they also, like, they monitor social media too. They're a big social media. Like, I know the guy that's over Manchester United, the Nike, everything like that for the Nielsen company. So what we need to do now is we need to create brand legitimacy, right? So because we're the only one in America doing what we're doing, I don't want to constantly have to sell people. What I want is legitimacy. In social media, like it or lump it, is just one of those ways that you get
Right.
legitimacy, right? And so, like us on Instagram, Facebook, all that stuff. Next Tech Academy, www.nexttechacademy.org. One word, NEXTECH Academy. You can check us out there. And ultimately, just the greater, because we've made this industrial kind of that we made this kind of splash in the industry, right? But the thing about the industry is they're so contained with needing to make product and everything like that that they don't have a lot of time to spend on this, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when you're sitting on the couch chilling or whatever you're doing, just remind, just check us out, right? Get us some, we need some brand legitimacy out there.
I know a guy.
I need a guy.
Well, Chris Donovant, thanks for coming, dude.
Yeah, man. I'm glad I
Till
could be
next
here.
time.
Yeah.
Appreciate you, bro.
Yeah, man. You guys have a good day.